New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has detailed her government's plan to reopen the country's borders over the next 10 months. Joining us live now is Sky News New Zealand contributor Wayne Hay. Wayne, appreciate your time. Our viewers really want to know, when will Australians be able to head back to visit our Kiwi friends, and what hoops are we going to need to jump through to do it?
Yes, well, certainly a lot of relief about this announcement from the New Zealand Prime Minister that the borders will open after almost 2 years. So it's going to be a phased approach. I'm sure you're not surprised by that. The first phase, which begins on February the 28th, will allow New Zealanders who are in Australia to be able to return home. Those New Zealanders have to be fully vaccinated, and they will not have to go into a managed quarantine situation, a quarantine hotel effectively. They can instead isolate at home for 10 days initially. It's expected, though, that those number of days will fall quite quickly down to 7 and then possibly even lower in the months ahead. Then about 2 weeks after that, March the 13th, 14th, then it's going to be New Zealanders from other countries around the world who can return home. And then several phases after that for Australians who want to come to New Zealand for business or for tourism, particularly with the upcoming ski season in the New Zealand winter. It's going to be July that they will be able to come into New Zealand quarantine free. And again, it's expected that that isolation period for those visitors will be quite reduced by that stage. Now, that July period, the Prime Minister says, could also come forward quite significantly.
And what is the COVID situation there at the moment, Wayne? How many cases are being recorded on average each day? What sort of rules and restrictions are Kiwis needing to live with at the moment?
Yeah, well, the Omicron variant, which everyone was so concerned about, did finally arrive in New Zealand. So we're getting numerous cases every day of not just COVID-19, but in particular of that Omicron variant, which is now the dominant variant in New Zealand. So today it was in excess of 140 new community cases. So it's been steadily climbing again. The government has warned that with this new variant that we could see thousands of new cases every day. And in an ironic way, I guess, that's partly why the New Zealand government has decided to open the borders now, because with so many cases circulating in the community now and in the months ahead, it would be redundant, or a redundant system, if you like, to have fully vaccinated, healthy people coming from overseas and still having to spend 14 days sitting in a quarantine hotel. So at the moment, there are very few restrictions at the moment. We're in that red light setting right around the country. We have a traffic light system at the moment, which has replaced nationwide lockdown. So there are restrictions on the number of gatherings that can take place of 100 people, mask wearing inside venues and things like that. But for the most part, New Zealand is open for business, apart from that border. And as mentioned, that will change very soon.
Wayne, so what sort of fallout have you seen there to the Charlotte Bellis story? Our viewers will have seen us reporting the last couple of days. This is the journalist who's been working in Afghanistan. She's pregnant. She wanted to get home. And eventually the New Zealand government has said that she could do that, but not before Afghanistan and also Australia offered to help her in the meantime. Has that been a big political story there?
Yes, certainly. It was a big story in the media, as you'd expect, and then ultimately became a political issue with back and forth between the government and the opposition. From the government's point of view, they pointed out a few things, that Charlotte Dawson was in fact offered an MIQ position earlier before this became a public issue. The timing wasn't right for her, so she turned that down. They say she was also offered consular assistance when she was in Afghanistan working there, and she did not reply to those two offers of consular assistance. It's certainly become a big issue, that's for sure. And what it has done is, apart from her case as an individual case, it has highlighted the plight of so many New Zealanders who have been stuck overseas for the best part of 2 years. So many of them unable to return to New Zealand because there simply haven't been enough rooms in those MIQ facilities.
So Wayne, how has all of that and the issue of the border more generally affected Jacinda Ardern's popularity? I mean, there are always going to be critics, obviously, but broadly, has her handling of the pandemic received widespread support?
Well, I think it's gone through phases. I think everyone accepts the fact that the tactic initially to keep COVID-19 out of New Zealand as much as possible, an elimination strategy, as it's been called, was the right one, and the statistics bear that out. We've only had 53 deaths in New Zealand since the start of the pandemic, but of course that's come at a price. The people stuck overseas is one of those. The economy, of course, has suffered with no tourists able to come into New Zealand, but New Zealand hasn't been alone with those problems. So her popularity was very high in the early and middle stages of the pandemic, but more recently we've started to see the popularity decline. The latest poll numbers show her preferred Prime Minister stakes falling, and that's partly because this pandemic is dragging on, and some feel that the New Zealand government hasn't been dynamic enough, hasn't moved quick enough to do things like reopen the border. But it's also because the opposition, the main opposition party, the National Party, has really struggled for the past few years to get some stability in its leadership. Its latest leader, Christopher Luxon, is proving to be the most popular for some time, and certainly his election to the leadership of that party has had an effect on Jacinda Ardern's popularity.
Wayne, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.